I'm Alison Holt, and I'm a textile artist.
Hello, I'm Chris Stafford, and this is Art, the podcast where we get up close and personal as we get to know creative women from around the world of visual arts. This is Season 3, Episode 9. My guest this week is the English textile artist Alison Holt, whose imagination captures landscapes and nature and weaves them into colourful canvases that are often taken for paintings. Alison says each piece is a combination of silk painting and freehand machine stitching. The painting creates depth, perspective and richness to the work and combines effectively with stitch to give detail and texture. Her work can be found in private collections around the world and in galleries from London to Sydney. Alison was born in Oswestry, Shropshire in 1956, the youngest of two girls to Cyril and Brenda Holt, who were garage proprietors. Her father died of a brain tumour when she was just 13, and her mother was left to raise her daughters. Her parents always supported her artistic interests, and by the time Alison graduated from Oswestry Girls' High School, she had only one ambition, which was to get into art college. From Shrewsbury Art School, she was accepted into the prestigious Goldsmith College in London, from where she graduated with a BA Honours in Fine Art Textiles, specialising in embroidery. By now, her talent had already been recognised, and she was immediately offered an exhibition and given commissions. She returned to Shropshire and began what was to become a parallel vocation in teaching at Wexham Art College. Alison married in 1993 and worked part-time in her studio while raising her two boys, Tom and Jonathan. For 40 years now, Alison has built her business as a textile artist, which includes writing books about her practice and teaching courses at her home studio throughout the year. Alison lives in Oswestry with her husband John Moses and their dog Bobby. Alison, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join me this week.
It's a pleasure.
And you have been listening to the show, so you know what you let yourself in for.
Yes, I do.
So what would be a normal day for you then? Would you be working most of the day?
Yes. Getting into the studio is my priority. Life gets in the way a little bit sometimes, so I don't always make it, but always, I think for the last 40 years, that's what I like to do. And then I slot in other things around it. If it's the other way round, I'm sure some people can relate to this. You never quite get in the studio. So I like to do it that way around.
And you've got children, two boys, but I'm sure by now they're grown and they're away and with their own families.
Yes, no, they're no grandchildren. My son Tom has a partner, and they live in London. And my son Jonathan lives locally, and he has a partner too. So we see plenty of them. But yes, they left home quite a while ago.
So you have the house to yourself pretty much then?
My husband and I, yes.
Well, I'm just wondering what a typical day would be like for you if you have your studio at home.
Yes, my studio is. We had a double garage that we converted to make a studio for me, which overlooks the garden, and it's big enough to teach in. So we did that about 8 years ago. Before that, I was in the attic. We used to joke about me starving in a garret. And yeah, I usually get in here between 9 and past, unless something else is scheduled. And if the weather is nice, which it has been the last few days, the doors are open, and the next thing I know, I'm in the garden doing a bit of weeding.
Ah, yes, you can combine your love of gardening too then.
I can.
That's a perfect existence, isn't it? Everything's just as it should be for you.
Yeah, I feel very privileged and very grateful for the life I've got. Yes, very much so.
And you live in a very pretty part of England on the Welsh borders there. I'm familiar with that area, and it really is inspiring. I'm sure the landscape does inspire you, doesn't it?
It does, yes. A lot of the work I do is based on just walks with my dog. of things that I see around here within probably only a 2 or 3 mile radius. Um, and so I don't have to go very far. And then the seasons give me even more variety. So yes, it's a great place to live, and it's my hometown. So it's what I know and what I love.
Born and raised, you didn't wander very far from home, except when you were in college.
No, I went down to London and came back here after I graduated from Goldsmiths and thought, well, I'll just have a little think about where I want to go and what I want to do. And I'm still here.
In retrospect, is there anywhere you would like to live if you weren't living where you are?
Um, I traveled extensively to Australia and New Zealand. I did before COVID. I was going there every year to teach and exhibit. And I did that 7 years in a row. And I just thought it was an amazing country, both of them. I loved both. But I think loving somewhere and actually wanting to up sticks and live there is very different. My husband worked abroad for a long time. So I was a bit like a single mum for several weeks at a stretch. And we talked about him getting different posts, married status rather than not. But we wanted the security for the children. My husband's mother and my mother were nearby, and it sort of worked for us that I stayed here and pursued my career. But we love to travel, so I've always been the same. I like to get out in the countryside, but I like to live on the outskirts of the town with all the advantages that gives me. And I like to live here and travel and visit places. It's the best of both worlds, really.
And we do have, of course, a lot of listeners in Australia and New Zealand, so you'll have to tell us where you were. Yes.
Oh, wow. Well, the first trip took me to Tasmania, which is fabulous, and then to Sydney. And then the following year, some students had come over from Perth and Adelaide and Melbourne to my course in Tasmania. And that's how I got to go back the second year, because they then asked me to go and teach in those locations. And it sort of snowballed like that. That's how I kept going back. I would get to new towns, new cities by students who had been on a course. So it was just lovely. It just was really organic, just developed and evolved. And I enjoyed every minute of it. It was hard work, and it took a lot of planning, but I didn't mind that because the end result was fantastic experience.
You mentioned your husband, John Moses. What does John do?
Well, he was in education. When we first met, he was living and teaching in Borneo. He worked for the Sultan of Brunei and set up a sixth form college and had a lot to do with education being developed over there. So he was out there for about 8 years. And then he looked for a job that gave him some time in the UK and some time abroad working. So he ended up in Libya, in the middle of the Sahara Desert. But it meant that he could still be in education. He was working in the training department, teaching nationals English and getting them into universities to be engineers. And there was a policy where he was really doing himself out of a job and all the other expats out of a job, because they were training local people to take over all the jobs with that. And he did that for a long time.
Well, I'm bound to ask how you met.
My best friend is John's cousin, and she introduced us. I was 18, and so was she. And she said, my cousin's coming home. He's been working in Borneo for several months, and I think you'll like him. I think you should meet him. So, yeah.
And then what happened? Did you marry early then? Tell us the story.
No, the running joke is that we had 3 attempts at a relationship before we finally got our act together. So I was actually 30 when John and I got together.
Third time's a charm.
Yes. So we had some ups and downs, I think you might say, in between. But yeah, it's we've been together now 30 something years. Yeah. So two children. So happy endings.
Indeed. Indeed, it worked out in the end. Now, let's go back to your early life because, as you said, it was all very local. You didn't move far from Oswestry. You were born in 1956 in Oswestry.
I was.
Tell us a little bit about your parents, Cyril and Brenda, who are garage proprietors. Was that always the case?
Well, when I was born, I think my father was a mechanic. My mum worked in a pharmacy, and they wanted their own business. And so when I was 7, we moved out of Oswestry to a village called Luncliffe, which is sort of towards the Welsh border. And they took on a business there where my father was in charge of mending cars. He had a paint shop where he actually mended the bodies as well as the engines. And my mum was in charge of petrol sales and car sales. And that was the family business. And that's where I was brought up. And they worked jolly hard. They really did.
Was your dad involved in World War II?
No. World War II ended before I think my father did his national service, but he wasn't old enough to be in World War II, no.
It's quite a few years since the end of World War II, of course, but I'm wondering, being a child of the 50s, if you did feel any effects at all.
Personally, I don't think so, although a lot of the attitude of my grandmother and my mother was a result of rationing, which obviously the whole country was affected by. So there was always that thing about not wasting food and, just generally being very careful with money and working hard and all the rest. But I don't think there were strong feelings about how difficult the war had been, because my grandfather actually didn't fight in the Second World War because he was excluded, because I think it was deemed that the work he was doing was important enough that he had to a chauffeur for Lord Harlech, which is a local family. Harlech was actually it's his name at the end of the films at the cinema. He was I forget what the title he was, but he would be part of the kind of censorship team or something. Sorry, I'm sounding a bit vague. Anyway, I'm rambling a bit. Their house, where my grandfather was a chauffeur, became a hospital during the Second World War. And he was in charge of the maintenance on the whole of that house. And so he kept the boiler going and he did all the repairs and made sure that hospital, which looked after injured soldiers, was well maintained and kept running. So they had a very different war to some people.
Yes, indeed. I'm wondering which part of England was that? Was that in your area?
That's here. We live opposite the fields that lead up to the house, which is in different hands now. But my mum was brought up there. They had a flat in the grounds, and she had an interesting upbringing.
What kind of stories were you hearing then from your grandparents when you were a child?
Oh, all sorts of interesting things about really being in service, and the fact that they were rubbing shoulders, if you like, with the landed gentry. I think one of the interesting things was how the war changed the attitude. And my mum, born in 27, by the time the First World War had finished, the attitude to whether they could have any conversation with or be seen by anybody visiting changed radically. So my mum's younger brother actually played with the children from the big house, and also any visiting children. So, the Kennedys visited and my uncle played with them and, that sort of thing. So I found that interesting. And my mum was interesting because the last place she wanted to do was go into service. So she was very much her own woman.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because, the family was in service, that you really felt the impact of the class system.
I don't think I did personally. I think my mum didn't want to be in that world, which is why she went to work at the chemist in the pharmacy and why she and my father wanted to run their own business. They were forging ahead in their own way. And so I didn't really experience any of that. I heard the stories from my grandparents, but my mum's stories were really about her own experiences, which weren't really, this in the same world.
Were you close to your parents? Which one did you spend most times with, and what kind of things would you be doing?
I was closest to my mum. My father died when I was 13, so that relationship obviously ended then. But I was close to him. He was one of life's enthusiasts. So if you showed any interest in anything, as a child, and he would say, "Oh, well, we better get you some flippers, and we better get you a mask, and anything that you might need." And then when I was 9, I learnt to ride, and I was fortunate that he said, "Well, we should get you a pony. You need your own horse." So I had a pony from the age of about 10. And that was down to my father. He was very generous and, encouraged us.
What did you do with your pony? Did gymkhanas, pony club?
Yeah, badly. Well, I just used to go out riding. I just used to love to get out in the countryside. You could go a lot further on a horse than you could walking. And that's what I love to be. I just love to be outside. So that was the perfect thing for me.
Well, were you competitive?
Not really. No, I did try to learn to jump and, do various things, but my heart wasn't in it. And I don't think my skill level was there either. So it was really about just riding horses and being out in the countryside, which fortunately that's where I lived when I was about 4 miles out of the town. So it was on the doorstep. So that was lovely.
Your father, your parents were really indulging you, whatever you wanted to try.
Supporting. I didn't feel indulged, but I felt supported. I don't think I was spoilt. There's a difference, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt very supported and encouraged.
You have a sister, Pauline, elder or younger than you?
3 years older.
And were you good mates? Did you play together as children?
Not really. No, we sort of rubbed along together. Okay. We have a good relationship now, which is lovely. That not to imply we had a bad relationship when we were at home, but there's always sort of sibling stuff going on, isn't there? And so we didn't do a lot of things together. That's my memory. That we were quite separate. She didn't want to ride. She didn't come swimming. We didn't do those sort of things together.
Alison, what were the circumstances of your father's death?
Oh, he had a brain tumor, and and died. Well, I had an operation, but it was malignant, so he died six months later. Yeah, very sad for my mum. Difficult for us. It was life-changing for all of us. It has quite an impact, that.
Absolutely. I mean, to lose a parent, at such a young age, for any child, it's very, very hard. And I'm wondering how you reflect on the impact it had on you personally as a 13-year-old child.
Yeah, I think it's made me very independent, because I think I watched my mum become very independent. So I think when you lose a parent, there's lots that go on. And I think my mother was an amazing role model. She carried on that business, which was a very male-orientated world, but she she managed extremely well. And I just watched her, well, and listened to her say things like, well, you've got two choices, haven't you? Which really means you've only got one. You have to get on with it. That would be her philosophy. You can't just give up.
No, absolutely. She was determined to carry on, kicking on, as they say. Now, what would you have learnt from that then that you carried into your adult life?
Well, I think not to let things deter you from what your goals are. I think, as I said, I think I'm very independent. I like a challenge. I suppose it'd be interesting to ask my children what sort of mother I am. Maybe not.
Well, I was going to ask you next, actually, what your friends, what your family, perhaps your mother even, how they would describe you.
I honestly don't know. I know my mum was very proud of everything I've achieved. She told me that, which was lovely. But I'm not sure how she'd describe me. Bit strong-willed, perhaps.
What about your family? How would they describe you now, or your friends?
Well, my good friend Mal, my best friend Mal, she says that I'm her best friend. She values that highly, like I value her. So I don't know what makes a good friend. Somebody you can rely on, somebody who keeps it real, somebody who supports you. Like my parents supported and encouraged me. I like to do that with other people and my own children.
Going back to childhood then, Alison, you obviously enjoyed the big outdoors. I'm wondering what else you did. Was there any art interest as a child?
Yes. Yeah, very much so. That was really a strong hobby for me, just drawing. Absolutely loved it. And discovering that I could draw. I remember at school, I would be 11 and we all had to sit opposite each other in the art class and draw the person across the table from you. And we had an hour. And I can remember looking at my drawing and thinking, I'm not sure people will recognize who this is. And then they pinned them all up on the board and we all stood back and we looked at our own and looked at everybody else's. And I can remember thinking, oh, wow, well, at least it looks human. There were some really interesting drawings up there. And I remember thinking, oh, I can draw. I was worried about a likeness, but, I'd got the eyes and the nose and the mouth in the right place. And it was a real eye-opener because we all have different skill sets, don't we? And I think in education, it's really important that people are allowed to find their strengths. It doesn't always happen, does it? Education's become so prescriptive and the art's squeezed out. But yeah, for me, that was just so important.
Did you feel then that your art was drawn out of you when you were in school, before you went to college?
I think so, yeah. I had a really good art teacher. And so colour theory and perspective, it seemed a little dry, I can imagine, to some people, but I found it all very interesting. All those essential building blocks. I'm very grateful for that because it gave me such a good grounding and an enthusiasm as well. It wasn't dry. And I think it was a really, really good base for me to start art college with.
So your pathway through high school then was determining what you were going to do. It was no doubt that you wanted to get into the arts.
Absolutely. Yes. Art college all the way.
What else did you do in school? What kind of student were you?
I was extremely average, which is a family joke. When I got into Goldsmiths College, my mother told the local newspaper because she was very proud of me. And when they asked her what she thought and how she felt, she said, I'm absolutely delighted. And because Alison was very average at school, which I just think is hilarious.
You clearly evolved as an artist.
Well, I did. Yes, I think what my mum meant was I was very average at everything else. And so there's this kind of interesting viewpoint that perhaps art was the only thing I could do. anyway, it was all I wanted to do, so that's fine. I went to high school. I did O levels and A levels, and as I say, in actual fact, being average is not a bad thing, is it?
What else did you do in school? Were you a very social child? Did you make friends easily?
Yes, I think I might have been seen as too social.
Distracting you from your studies?
Probably, yes. Chatting at the back of the class might be something I did a little bit too much of. Very sociable.
Yeah, and going through school in the 60s and 70s was a very interesting time too, socially and
sure.
In terms of pop culture as well. Were you into pop culture? Were you into music?
Oh, yeah, we definitely were into music. Yes, very keen on all the Tamla Motown stuff and the glam rock, Bowie, T-Rex. I can remember getting very excited about all those people. And we just faithfully watched Top of the Pops every Thursday. That's just my era, and talked about who was on there the next day. So yeah, that was a big deal. Music was a big, and going to dances, that was a big deal as well. So, 15, 16, 17, that's my memory.
Discos. How about concerts? Do you remember the first concert you went to?
Gosh, that's a good question. I'm trying to think. I did go to quite a lot, but I'm not sure what age I would be. Maybe 18 or 20. I went to see people like Fleetwood Mac, Billy Joel, Stevie Wonder, all of those.
Yeah. So were you musical yourself then, apart from dancing and enjoying the professionals? Did you do anything yourself? Did you play an instrument?
No, not musical at all.
But you enjoy it?
Yes, very much.
Is it a part of your daily life in the studio? Do you have to have music playing?
I do. I like the radio on because I quite like a random selection of tunes thrown at me. So yeah, I go to different radio stations, depending on who the DJ is and what sort of music they play. So I suppose I do quite like the 70s and 80s. Can't remember the 90s. Too busy rearing two children. Can't remember any of that music at all. If there's a quiz on, don't ask me a 90s question.
Do you sing along? Are you a karaoke girl?
No, I don't sing along. No, I might do in the car.
Don't we all in the car? I think we all do.
Yeah, but in the studio, it's very much background music while I'm working. I like the radio on so I can drift in and out. I've tried listening to a play while I work, but I actually sit and listen to the play to the end instead of getting on with some work. So that doesn't work.
So tell us, Alison, where and when you were actually deciding on which medium you were going to use. Was it whilst you were at Shrewsbury at the Art College or when you got to Goldsmiths? Where did you get the inspiration to make that decision?
It was at Shrewsbury Art School where I had a really good tutor called Cameron Scott, he specialised in textiles. And so he really encouraged me to draw, but to draw with thread. And he used to set me different projects. We got on really well and he encouraged me. And he was really the one that said that I should apply to Goldsmiths. He felt that I could get a portfolio of work together and be worthy of a place there. So I owe him a lot. So he set me on that path. I thought I wanted to do ceramics, but it wasn't what I imagined. You know, when you've just had an art college, when you only had a school experience of art, which is painting and drawing and not even any 3D work really. You get to art college and there's all these things to choose from. And I got very excited about ceramics, but it wasn't what I thought it was. It was kind of much more technical, and I didn't really enjoy the fact that you'd have to put it in a kiln and say a little prayer and hope that it came out in one piece. That didn't appeal to me. Must be a little bit of a control freak, because that didn't appeal to me at all. I don't want any chance. I want it to be within my sight and within my control from A to Z, really. So yes, it was at Shrewsbury, and that was all hand embroidery in my portfolio that got me on the course. But then how my work developed was down to how we were taught at Goldsmiths, which was given all of these tools to play with, all of these ideas, and being told that, you should think of a sewing machine as something you can draw with. And that just appealed to me straight away. I just thought I found my thing. And that was the purpose of the course, was really to show you all these different ways of working with textiles.
Because Goldsmith College is quite a prestigious college, so that must have been quite a turning point, I would imagine, to have been able to go to Goldsmith.
Definitely, yes. I felt very fortunate, and it was a terrific experience. The tutors we had, and the fact that I went there has definitely given me opportunities and opened some doors for me. So, yeah, I'm very grateful for the fact that I went there.
Was that a BA or a master's?
It's a BA honours in fine art textiles with the speciality of embroidery, so specialising in embroidery.
And so that really determined your career path then. So what happened next when you graduated?
The first thing that happened was I was offered an opportunity to exhibit in an exhibition called Textprint, which was for the 30 most promising graduates that year. And so I went down to London and took part in that. And that gave me an opportunity to put some work in a couple of different galleries. I got commissioned to design some wallpaper. That was a little bit weird, but interesting. And then I came back up to Shropshire to have a little think about what to do next. And I got offered a job in Wrexham Art College, which is about 20 miles away. And the reason I got that job was they phoned Goldsmiths and said, have you got any graduates that have just qualified that live anywhere near, because we need a textile tutor. And it was a really tough interview because I was the only one there.
Did you think that that would be the pathway into becoming a textile artist, that you would have to be a teacher too?
No, I always said the last thing I wanted to do was teach, because when you're doing a degree in embroidery, you get asked an awful lot of questions by friends and family, and it's basically, what on earth are you going to do with that qualification? And I always said, I don't know, but I don't want to teach. And that's because I visualized myself in a secondary school with a lot of unruly pupils who were not interested in art. And I thought it would be more about discipline than teaching art. I mean, actually turned out that I loved teaching, but I don't think I would ever have loved working in a school, because I think the administration and the paperwork and the school inspection and all of that would not have suited me at all. But to teach enthusiastic adults who are keen is an absolute joy. And so when I went to Wrexham Art College and started teaching, I had some mature students. I used to work one day a week on the fashion department, one day a week on the fine art department, and half a day a week on their foundation course, which is the course I'd done at Shrewsbury. So it was very interesting, very varied, and I really enjoyed it.
How long were you there?
About 3 years. And then there was a change of head. And because I was part-time, you don't have any security. So an awful lot of part-time staff lost their hours. I went down to half a day a week. So the writing was on the wall. And so I then looked for some alternative, and I found an advert in the Craft magazine offering a free studio in a group of studios to then give kind of talks about the other artists. They'd have visitors and groups would come along, and you were the one that showed them round and gave them a little bit of information about all the different artists that was in there. So I went and applied, and that's where I went. And that was when I was, again, near Chester, and again, not far away. And I was in that studio for 18 years. That's where I started, and was in a converted barn with a lot of like-minded people, which was really good.
So that was kind of a cooperative then, was it?
Well, it was owned by somebody who had this idea of creating a craft centre with lots of artists and craftspeople in all of these studios. And then he was in the farmhouse with a shop that sold craft materials and crafts, and had a cafe. So that was his little enterprise. And he was creating a business out of that. And so I was there with a woodworker and a potter and a jeweler. And then we had a picture framer move in, which was wonderful for me because I needed picture frames. And it just evolved and developed. We saw lots of people come and go. But I was there for 18 years. Just very fortunate. That was my next step.
Starting off as an artist is never easy, but it seems to me that it was seamless from going from college, from Shrewsbury to Goldsmith, and then actually getting commissions and being known as a professional artist very early on in your career as a young woman. That must have been a great confidence builder for you.
I guess when you look back, it all looks really well planned, but I don't think it actually was. I think it evolved. Losing your teaching hours was quite traumatic, and wondering what to do next. And then having a free studio still meant that I'd got to earn a living, and I'd got rent to pay. And it was a very hand-to-mouth experience. And the first few years I was there, people would open the studio door and say, "Do you make or do you embroider?" And I'd say yes before they could finish the sentence. And so I was embroidering padded coat hangers. Somebody who was opening a new shop in Chester. I was selling small pieces of my work to several small galleries. That took me quite a few years to build up. So it was really hard work. I was working 6 and 7 days a week. So it sort of looked seamless and relatively easy, but there was a lot of dedication and application, really. That went with it all. I think when you're asked the questions, you tend not to dig too deep with what was actually going on. And I did take a job at one stage because I couldn't afford the rent, which was another teaching job, which was really very stressful. And I only lasted about 4 months, but it did just get me over a financial hump. So yeah, there's been ups and downs, but yes, I've been very fortunate with the commissions I've had and the opportunities I've had, for sure. Yeah.
Were there times of self-doubt, though? Is often that happens with artists, the imposter syndrome, that I can't make a living out of this. This is all well and good, but I can only make a living if I'm teaching. What was your mindset in all of this? Were you so determined that this was going to work, you never wavered from your path?
I think that's true. I think I was just so determined to make it work. And so the ideal would be to produce artwork that I was passionate about, sell it through galleries, sell it direct to people by some method. I opened my studio up, and that works really well. That was always my goal, but I'm there now, and I've been doing that for quite a long time. But I literally would embroider anything in the early days because that would pay the rent. And I don't think that did me any harm. I enjoyed the challenge. And so running the teaching parallel to the making my own work And sometimes I feel some of the work I made in the early days was compromised because it had to sell. And I've slowly moved towards things that I really want to make. But I'm my mother's daughter. I'm very pragmatic. So you don't, you don't fight against how it is. You recognize how it is. You're a realist, and you work with that.
And during this time, of course, you had to raise the two boys. So how much of your art had to wait then, or were you able to combine the two, keep on your art path at the same time as raising the boys? How did that timing work out?
Well, it worked out really well because before I had the children, I probably had about 10 years of being a professional artist. And so I felt like I had a career that just needed to sort of pause or slow down for a little bit. And I worked hard at making sure it was there for me to go back to. So my husband was incredibly supportive. I used to have the children in nursery 3 days a week, and I would work those 3 days. And when my husband came home on leave, he would take care of the children, but we tended to do a lot of things together as a family. So yeah, my art career took a bit of a back seat for 4 or 5 years. But I was still pretty active. I can remember being accepted at the Chelsea Flower Show as in the sort of art gallery section that they had. And that was such a great opportunity. And asking my mum whether she thought she could manage both children for a week while we went to London. My mum said, yes, of course. And I think they were 2 and 4 years of age. So, I did keep things ticking over. And that became the mainstay. I mean, I talked about selling direct to the public. The Chelsea Flower Show offered me that opportunity. And I actually ended up going there 26 years in a row. That was a major selling venue for me in London.
And from that, did you get commissions?
I did, yes. I mean, that's what Chelsea gave me, was again the opportunity to meet the right people. And so lots of commissions. I would meet gallery owners, opportunities to teach different places. So yes, it did it again. It was a bit like goldsmiths. It was, it's like a seal of approval, isn't it? If you're in the right place, in the right gallery, it's a shortcut for people to recognize that you are of a certain standard. And so I think Chelsea gave that to me, Chelsea Flower Show. Yeah, it was great. Really good experience.
Endorses you as an artist, and it gives your work validity, doesn't it?
Exactly. It does, yeah. Helps with the imposter syndrome.
So how much of your work now is commissions then, Alison?
It fluctuates a lot. I've got one commission waiting to be started at the moment. Last year I did 3. Some years I might do 6 or 7 or 8 commissions. It just varies hugely. We had a very strange experience with COVID. Everybody did, when everything was just on hold. And it almost feels like I've started a career again. And because I don't go to somewhere like Chelsea Flower Show now, I'm not getting the same exposure. And so I think that's the reason, probably just thinking now, probably the reason I'm not getting as many commissions. But that's okay. It frees up my time for me to pursue my own ideas and my own work.
And then your own ideas, do they come from, as we talked about earlier, the landscape in Shropshire, or do you go out and photograph to get inspiration? How does that work?
I do, yes. I've just always got a camera with me, or these days it's the phone, isn't it? Because the cameras are so good. And And so, yes, it's walking the dog, out with friends, walking. And they're places that I see. I capture things I am attracted to. So it'll be the juxtaposition, certain colours and shapes. And it's really about trying to recreate those back in the studio. That's my starting point. I can't take a sewing machine outside, so I've got to bring my ideas back somehow. And I think photography for me is the best way because it's the closest to working from life that I can manage. I don't want to sit and sketch in the landscape because I want to explore on the fabric with the threads through stitches. That's my drawing process. And so I draw how I would sketch. And my sketches are always super detailed. So if you draw it once out in the open air, I don't want to then recreate it in stitch. I want the stitching to be the first exploration, if you like.
How much of the time would you spend teaching?
Since COVID, I've restricted where I teach. So I'm only teaching in my studio here. I do a series of 3-day courses. I've found 3 days is the sort of optimum amount. It works really well for students to have a day of silk painting, which is how I start all my work. There's always a silk painted base. And 2 days of stitching. So about 5 or 6 courses in a year.
What sort of sizes would you typically work on, Alison?
My work's quite small scale, so I still think in inches. So a lot of my pieces are 7 by 5, 7 by 7, 8 by 10, that sort of thing. I do some bigger pieces, but they're a bigger commitment time. But I do some larger pieces just because it's lovely to have that variety for it to be on display with some variety, but also for me to tackle something large. And then when I've worked on that for a week or so, it's really nice then to do something that only takes me perhaps 3 or 4 days to complete. So I do like variety.
What would be your biggest piece of work, do you think?
The largest piece I've ever done, I would think about 3 foot by 4 foot, I would think is about the largest piece I've ever made.
And you are shipping all around the world. Do you have clients around the world still?
Not so much now, although I do sell from my website and they do go all over. During COVID, I was posting things to New Zealand and Australia, all over the US, all over Europe. So yeah, I have got work all over the world, which is lovely to think about, actually.
In private collections, now what about galleries and public? Where would we see your work?
Well, the Embroiderers Guild of Australia piece from me, they have that in their gallery in Sydney. I don't have a lot of work in public galleries. It's mostly private collections. I do exhibit regularly in some really good galleries, but not have anything permanently on display anywhere.
Where would you like to be shown? Are there places that you think, yes, that would be really cool, that would really make a difference to my status in some way internationally?
I don't really have any aims or ambitions in that department. I think where I am at the moment is I'm just really busy focusing on doing my very best work. I feel on reflection, over the years, my priority has been raising a family, actually making a living, making sure that I earn enough money. And now my priority is definitely just exploring my own art and indulging myself in a sense. I mean, recently I've been exhibiting the Mall galleries in London, which I feel is quite an achievement. And there's a few societies that regularly exhibit there. And I've been applying to their open call exhibitions. and have been quite successful. Again, this is new for me in the last 2 years. So I've had work accepted by the Marine Society and the Royal Society of Graphic Artists and the Royal Society of British Artists. And so that's something I'm exploring, and that has a real sense of achievement to it. It's quite tough to get into these exhibitions, and you have to take the rejections as well as the acceptance letter. So that's where I'm at the moment.
I'm wondering what's on your bucket list then?
Don't have one. It's just about making more art, really, and enjoying what I do.
And where does the satisfaction come from? Is it when you stand back and having finished a piece and you hang it, you're satisfied with that piece? Or is it when it gets on public view or gets a public reaction?
I think it's for myself when I see it finished. It's an interesting experience creating artwork, because you go through various stages of loving it and hating it, and being excited by it and then feeling despair. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. So in the space of a few days of working my way through a project, I can love it and hate it in equal measure, and just feel that it is working, and then you apply yourself and then you rescue it. And so I think it's very hard to be satisfied with your work, which is why you just keep making more. You're always striving to improve. And some people can look at my work and be so complimentary. And I've trained myself not to point out the mistakes. I've trained myself not to point out where it's not quite as good as it could be. Because I can always see the fault. I can always look at something and think, oh, I could do better.
Well, it sounds as if you're in a very good place in your career. 40 years now you've been doing this, and obviously a lot more art to come, Alison. So thank you for taking time out of your studio to join us on the podcast where you can find links to our guest social media and also to our social media. You'll also find our email address, and you can drop us a line if you'd like with any suggestions for guests to theartpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget that's art with 2 A's. And if you're a regular follower of the podcast, you'll know that we have a YouTube channel where since season 3, we've been recording bonus content with each guest. So you can go over to our YouTube channel at The Art Podcast. The Art Podcast, of course, is art with 2 A's, where you'll find extended conversation between me and my guest. So an extra few minutes there where you can actually see the guest yourself. And also on our YouTube channel, you'll find all of our podcast episodes right the way back to season 1. And if you have a moment whilst you're on your podcast app and would like to leave us a review and a 5-star rating, that will help our rankings among hundreds and hundreds of podcasts. So, of course, that increases our visibility and helps others find the show. And you can, of course, share each episode or the show from your podcast app with anyone that you think might enjoy the show. My thanks again to my guest this week, Alison Holt, and to you for listening. I know you have lots of choices. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another guest from the world of visual arts. So I do hope you'll join me then.